Today on thetruthaboutcars.com, we're out here taking a look at the very futuristic BMW i3. This particular model is the range extending model, which means we have a 0.65 liter gasoline engine in the back attached to a generator. That generator generates electricity and can shuttle it on over to the battery pack or the electric motor to drive the car forward. There's also an EV-only version of the i3 that behaves very similar to this model, but BMW tells us they expect this one to sell more in the United States. Key things to know about the i3 is that this vehicle is not a parallel hybrid vehicle like a Prius or a Cadillac ELR or a Chevy Volt or any of the Ford Fusion Energy products. This vehicle can never have its gasoline engine directly drive the wheels. It's only a serial hybrid when the range extender is being used. That's very important because the Chevy Volt and the Cadillac ELR actually perform better when they're running on the gasoline engine because they can enter that parallel hybrid mode. The i3 is a rear-wheel drive vehicle and everything is in the back. That means when you open the hood, it's not really a hood, it's actually a frunk, and we have a small storage compartment for your EV supply cord and the can of Fix-A-Flat. That means that everything that makes the car go is either back here or under the vehicle. The structure of the vehicle is a combination of a carbon fiber passenger cell and an aluminum chassis and battery compartment. Back here in the rear, we have a 0.67 liter two-cylinder motorcycle-derived engine generating electricity in our range extending model. Next to it, we have a 170 horsepower AC electric motor. Powering that electric motor is a 22 kilowatt hour battery pack slung under the vehicle. 18.8 of it is actually usable by you. That's to help improve battery life. By positioning that battery low in the vehicle and the motor and the engine in the back, they've actually given this a slight rearward biased weight balance. It's about 55% out back, about 45% in the front. If you get the EV only model, it comes out closer to 50-50. If these tires look unusually skinny to you, that's because they are. They're 155 with tires up front. I think I have spare tires that are a little bit bigger than that, and 175 with tires in the back because, again, we do have 55% of the weight back there and it's rear-wheel drive. It may sound crazy for a BMW to have tires this narrow, but the narrower the tires, the better your fuel economy, whether you're an EV or a gasoline vehicle. BMW can get away with that because the i3 is incredibly light thanks to all this carbon fiber going on. The base EV version weighs just about a cupcake over a Mazda MX-5 Miata with an automatic transmission. This range extending model is only about 300 pounds heavier, so still much lighter than your average mid-size sedan. The i3 is a little backwards from what you normally find in a plug-in vehicle in the US. We have the charge port right back here, DC quick charging is available, and then you'll find the gasoline filler right up here. If you're using the level 1 quick charger, which comes with the vehicle and is located right here in the frunk, charging can take between 16 and 22 hours depending on how quickly you're charging. This vehicle does support 8, 12, or 16 amp charges with this 120 volt cable. That is a little bit different than some of those other options out there, and it means that over an 8-hour charge you can get an additional 15 miles if you can charge at 16 amps. The carbon fiber passenger cell allows BMW to give us this interesting door arrangement where we have the front door that opens this way and a rear suicide door, one on either side. That makes getting in and out of the vehicle very easy. Now, the front seats are a little bit less comfortable than I had expected from BMW. They're quite thin and they don't adjust in as many ways as you'll find in a BMW 3 Series. We also don't have adjustable lumbar support, although it is relatively generous. Getting in and out of the back seats is also quite easy. This front seat is all the way back in its tracks. I have a decent amount of room back here. I have quite a generous amount of headroom. The rear seats are not as cramped as you might think because this is about 6 inches longer than a Mini Cooper, which gives you a little bit of extra room right back here. With the seats in their rearmost position, we do have about 12 cubic feet of cargo space back here. It's about the same as your average convertible. We can put a 26-inch roller bag in this position and still close the hatch, but we can't put a 24-inch roller bag sideways under this tonneau cover. You would have to remove it. Closing the rear tailgate, you can see the other design feature of the i3. We have this glass panel right here on the rear hatch. And that actually has the lights behind it. This is not a separate lamp module. As you can see, there's no seam. Tail lamp right here and turn signal right over here. Inside the i3 is very modern, very Euro funky. We have this Idrive display that's sort of floating over the dashboard on an arm coming out from the passenger side. It's very stylized steering wheel, and we have a very small LCD for our instrument cluster. I'm really surprised this instrument cluster is as small as it is. I had expected a larger display out of BMW. Everything about the dashboard is designed to be a futuristic or recyclable design statement. We have these door panels and dashboard panels that kind of feel a little bit low rent, but they're designed to be ultra light, and they're also made out of easily recyclable materials. If you get the right version of the i3, we also get a eucalyptus panel on the dashboard to make it a little bit more attractive and bring some real wood into the cabin. One thing that I found a little bit unusual and hard to get used to is the location of the start-stop button. It's right here, sort of behind the steering wheel on this very funky shaped shifter. I found that I either had to go through the steering wheel like this to actually stab that start-stop button, or I risked reaching around and hitting the windshield wiper controls whenever I wanted to turn the car on and off. Over on the passenger side, we have a glove box that really is quite deep. I have a wallet in there, but I was able to fit a very small tablet computer inside. 0 to 60 happens in 7 seconds if you get the model with the range extender, and you can take half a second off if you want the EV only model. Handling really does suffer with these narrow tires, but it's not as big of a sacrifice as you might think because of the light curb weight. This definitely handles better than something like a Nissan Leaf, but not quite as well as something like a Ford Focus EV. Obviously, with 155 width tires up front, this is not going to handle as well as a Tesla Model S either. But those 155 width tires are possible because 55% of the weight is in the rear, and this is a rear-wheel drive vehicle, so it doesn't feel like any of those other mass-market EVs out there. Because all those other mass-market EVs are front-wheel drive, and that's not the same kind of feel we're getting in this. With narrow, low rolling resistance tires all the way around, braking suffers a little bit. Distances were a little bit longer than I would like, although fade resistance was definitely in check. The most peculiar thing about this out on the road, however, really is the accelerator pedal. The accelerator pedal is what BMW calls a one-pedal concept. So we're driving along right like this, and I'm pressing on the accelerator pedal, but when I let off the accelerator pedal, it really feels like someone is applying the brakes. And indeed, this car will go to a complete stop. I haven't touched the brake pedal yet, and it will actually hold itself there at the stop. The range extender is, of course, back there still rattling along. You can definitely hear it when we're out on the road. It sort of feels like someone has a scooter or a small motorcycle and they're hanging out right there on your rear quarter panel. The accelerator pedal definitely takes a little bit of getting used to. I found it handy in stop and go traffic, but a little annoying in light or moderate traffic because there's no way to make this vehicle coast aside from shifting it into neutral. Fun to drive isn't something you normally think about when you think about an EV, but the i3 is a little bit different than that, really thanks to this excellent weight balance, the very low center of gravity, and the rear-wheel drive bias. I've heard a number of horror stories about what I'm going to call the 30 horsepower barrier, because once this battery hits 0 as far as the software is concerned, you'll only have about 30 horsepower left, because that's all the range extender can put out. 30 horsepower in a modern car is not a whole lot. However, it was harder to get to that point than you might think. This range extender is really revving pretty hard because I'm driving this car hard out on this winding mountain road. Out on the open highway, unless you're going up a pretty steep grade, it's really hard to do. I tried my hardest. I had to go way over the speed limit in order to actually get this car to completely drain the battery, and then I was still able to continue up the hill, admittedly at a reduced pace. For some reason, I assumed that when you hit 30 horsepower, it would be more like someone applied the brakes or put the car in neutral, something like that, and you'd slow down really, really quickly out on the highway on that steep grade. But it wasn't like that. It actually took about 1.5 miles for me to go from my well over the speed limit speed to about 55 miles an hour, which was a comfortable rate of deceleration. That meant I was able to pull safely over to the right lane and I wasn't really blocking traffic. It never felt unsafe in that situation. Pricing on the i3 is surprisingly simple in the United States because there aren't as many standalone options as you'll find in other BMW models. Things start out at $42,400 for the EV-only model, $46,250 for the one with the range extender. There are 3 different trim levels, Mega, Giga, and Terra. If you load your i3 range extender all the way up, you end up at $55,850. Now that's of course before the possible federal and state tax incentives, which can top about $10,000 if you live in California or certain other states. Obviously, you should check with a tax professional before you depend on that $10,000 to help finance the car. If you care about your tunes, you're going to want to spend $800 on the available Harman Kardon sound system, and I strongly recommend the adaptive radar cruise control system at $2,500. Obviously, the i3 is more expensive than the Leaf or any of those other mass-market EV entries, but it's a decent amount cheaper than a Cadillac ELR or a Tesla. The i3 ends up just about the same price as the Mercedes-Benz B-Class, which is really its only true competition at the moment. The B-Class is only about $1,000 less expensive, but you don't get the available DC quick charger. It's an awful lot heavier, it's a little bit less efficient, it's also more traditional inside and out, which may or may not appeal to you. The big difference is that there's no range extender version of that Mercedes-Benz, and the range extender really is what separates this from any of those other EVs out there. It also separates this from the ELR, the Volt, or the Ford Fusion Energy products. Because unlike those other vehicles, the i3 is not intended to constantly drive under gasoline power. You can do it, obviously, as I have been during this week, but it's not designed for it, and that really is different than those other vehicles. That means that there are certain circumstances where you will end up with only 34 horsepower on tap. That's a big difference between the 170 that you get when it's running in EV mode. Some people have said that the i3 is an answer to a question that nobody has asked yet, but I actually see the i3 a little bit differently. This is definitely a technological step forward, and it really is bringing some interesting features to production vehicles. We've long had the ability to make carbon fiber bodies in cars, but we haven't really sold them in large numbers, and this is attempting to break that mold. We've also had the ability to make drivetrains like this for a long time, but we haven't actually sold them in the United States, in volume especially. This vehicle really is quite interesting because it makes an EV more practical, and it removes the range anxiety that a lot of people might have about an EV. And of course, lastly, there's the very self-serving ability to drive in the carpool lane all by your very self in California and certain other states. So if you're out there shopping for a commuter car, you do well to put the i3 on your shopping list. Just make sure that those tax credits apply to you before you do.